I'm Olivia Sandusky. We're docked here at Bombay Beach, about to set sail on the Salton Sea. It's the largest body of water in the state of California, facing a number of environmental challenges. But fortunately, I have local resident Kevin Key here to give us a tour, so let's head out. Kevin steers his boat away from the sea's eastern shore. The infamous Salton Sea stretches around us for 343 square miles. That's about twice the size of Lake Tahoe. And it's 226 feet below sea level, offering views of the Santa Rosa Mountains. As a photographer by trade, Kevin says the beauty of the landscape is what drew him to Bombay Beach.
I'm originally from San Diego. I first learned about the Salton Sea in late 2007. There was an exhibit at the Museum of Photographic Arts in Balboa Park. I saw that. I didn't know this place existed, and I just immediately fell in love with it. Came out here January of 2008. And then just would come back out here a few times a year. About 15 months ago, I decided to move here full time.
While the views are picturesque, the sea's waters are empty and polluted. Small clumps of algae float along the surface of the greenish-brown water, which is filled with agriculture runoff from nearby farms. The lake is more than twice as salty as the ocean, and it often smells like sulfur. With the conditions, many expect to see its shores filled with dead fish and birds. Those pictures became synonymous with the Salton Sea after algal blooms killed millions of tilapia in 1999, and small outbreaks have occurred since. But these days, there are very few dead fish on the shores. In fact, you'd be lucky to see any fish at all. Still, we're one of the only boats that's been out on the Salton Sea in years. And while this is my first time being on its waters, Kevin takes his boat out multiple times a week.
It's like a surreal experience, especially when you get to sunset. The water's pretty calm now, but when it's dead calm, it's like a mirror. It's just so reflective. But just the peacefulness and the tranquility, and it's pretty much, I'm the only boat out on this lake for the most part. Most people are either afraid to take their boat out, or, as I discovered when I got a boat, there's no working boat ramps or boat docks.
To drop his boat in, Kevin slides it along the muddy shoreline near his home in Bombay Beach. And from there, he can head virtually anywhere on this body of water, which is 35 miles long and 15 miles wide. And it's fairly shallow, dropping off to 50 feet at its deepest. However, the size of the sea is changing. The Salton Sea formed over 100 years ago when a levee at the Colorado River broke. Fresh water poured over the region, creating an ideal place for boating, swimming, and kayaking.
Here is the greatest combination of all: sea, desert, and mountains. And setting it all off like a jewel in the desert, Salton Sea.
But after the canal was restored, cutting off the flow of fresh water, it's been slowly shrinking ever since, leaving communities today with a drastic difference.
So the shoreline has receded about 50 feet, so we need to build a new dock. All of the marinas and all that over the years have been bulldozed down.
Water cuts at the Colorado River have also impacted the shoreline. And while millions of dollars have been put into restoration efforts, locals question how much of an impact it's making.
I feel like they don't want to deal with the dust problem. Really, I feel like they just want to take the lazy way out. They don't want to fix the Salton Sea. They would rather just chase people out of here.
Without fresh water, chemicals in the sea and its soil can be damaging to boats and unhealthy for people and wildlife that depend on this lake as part of their migration path.
I used to see a bunch of birds, and tons of birds, pelicans and egrets, until very recently, because I think the last of the fish have died off.
But the changes haven't stopped Kevin from enjoying a day out on his boat or even going swimming.
Oh yeah, once it gets a little warmer, I'll totally be swimming again. Still a good idea to rinse off. And you also want to be careful when there's a harmful algae bloom, or most massive algae bloom. This isn't too bad. When you see the huge globs of algae floating on the surface, usually it's a good time to avoid being in the water.
And Kevin likes to share the beauty he sees at Bombay Beach through the photographs he takes.
That's my intention, is to show people that, hey, the Salton Sea is not this quote-unquote toxic wasteland, and that Bombay Beach is a ghost town, and it's not. There's actually plenty of people that live here full-time, and there's even children and families in the town that, it's a town that's persevering.
He encourages others to come explore and learn about the area he calls home.
Come out here and visit and hopefully realize the potential that this place has to offer. Too many people just look at it as a lost cause.
After exploring in the water in the afternoon sun, Kevin and I make our way back to shore because it's time to clean up and head to the south end of the sea where the most recent efforts are underway. We're headed to the so-called Lithium Valley, where geothermal and lithium extraction will take place. In 2023, a study conducted in partnership with the U.S. Department of Energy found there's 17 million plus metric tons of lithium in the geothermal brine under the Salton Sea. It's one of the largest deposits in the world, and the area has since been coined Lithium Valley. And there are major developments to report as lithium gains momentum after months of delays. There are 3 companies set to extract lithium here at the south end of the Salton Sea. They are Berkshire Hathaway Energy Renewables, Controlled Thermal Resources, and Energy Source Minerals. While no lithium operations have started yet, each company aims to use new technology called direct lithium extraction to recover the valuable resource in the future. This method pairs lithium extraction with geothermal power plants that tap into Earth's heat to create energy. Geothermal power plants have been operating at the sea's south end for more than 4 decades. And at many of these plants, lithium facilities will be added to their existing infrastructure, while other geothermal and lithium facilities still need to be created. This video, provided by Controlled Thermal Resources, provides an in-depth look at how this works. At the geothermal power plants, the extremely hot liquid brine is collected from deep within the Earth's crust. Steam from the process creates energy. In the future, lithium carbonate will be filtered out of the brine and used to create batteries, primarily for electric vehicles, and then the brine and steam are returned to the Earth. Water used during the operational process will be provided by Imperial Irrigation District, not from the Salton Sea itself. But the south end of the sea is ideal for geothermal power because of how thin the Earth's crust is there. Boiling mud pots bubble up through that thin crust near the property lines of nearby geothermal facilities, just outside of the Red Island volcano, which is where I met with Controlled Thermal Resources CEO Rod Caldwell. From our viewpoint, we could see CTR's facility known as Hell's Kitchen. The company broke ground on this integrated geothermal power plant and lithium production facility in January of 2024, a moment Rod celebrated. But a lawsuit presented by environmental nonprofits Comité Cívico del Valle and Earthworks quickly stopped construction. The lawsuit said Imperial County didn't properly evaluate the environmental and tribal impacts of lithium development. Issues cited include water use, air quality, and earthquake potential. However, a year after they broke ground, Superior Court Judge Jeffrey Jones ruled those issues had been adequately addressed in the Environmental Impact Report. That dismissal in February gave lithium production the green light it needed to move forward.
It means that activity creates activity. I hope it means that our friends at Energy Source start construction shortly. Our friends at Berkshire Hathaway get going, and the whole Lithium Valley or the programmatic plan really comes into effect. You're going to see rail, you're going to see jobs, housing.
But the legal matters aren't over. In March, the environmental groups announced they're appealing the judge's decision and are pushing for stronger water conservation measures, among other things. While they did not seek an injunction to delay work this time around, Rod says the project has already been sidetracked.
It's effectively delayed the project 12 months. You know, our long lead equipment, turbines, generators, things that take transformers, that take 3 years to build, are staged and ready to be installed.
So when will we see lithium extraction begin?
We'll start construction around about, hoping all things equal, around September, subject to, again, appeals and things like that. But the equipment is built. You know, it's not like we've got to go out and do that. We've done that. We've drilled wells. We're ready to place it. So our target delivery date for that is end of 2026, end of next year. So that'll come together pretty quick, with lithium following shortly thereafter into the end of 2027.
CTR has completed drilling 2 full-diameter commercial wells using a seismic survey, and many more are on the way.
So these are the first 2 of how many?
45.
While there's not much on CTR's property right now, Plans for Stage 1 of Hell's Kitchen will require 68 acres of land with power plants, cooling towers, and a geothermal brine system on site, as well as a lithium manufacturing and packaging facility. But that's just the beginning. There will be 7 stages expected to support 2.9 million electric vehicles per year. And Rod expects this business to also benefit the local community.
The workforce is here, and effectively, if you can operate a John Deere tractor and a power takeoff, you can do a short-term course and triple the income and career by coming to a project like this. It's a very large, overall type of facility, let alone the opportunities to put battery cell manufacturing and other associated uses close by. So I can't give you a number on those, but I do know that we'll have some sort of positive impact.
In terms of environmental footprint, a report by UCLA calls direct lithium extraction the lowest impact of available extraction technologies. However, the study says the cumulative effects are unknown and need investigation. Rod says their campus focuses on sustainability, having a minimal physical footprint, and near zero carbon emissions.
California Environmental Qualitative Act, CEQA, is the most arduous environmental process on the planet today, really is. And we follow that letter of the law, 3, nearly 4 years of work, environmental reporting, mitigations.
And local environmental advocates say a minimal footprint is needed to leave wildlife undisturbed. However, in October, the Environmental Protections Agency announced an ongoing enforcement case against CTR. The EPA says it's reached a settlement with the company after finding it in violation of dredging and ditching work that harmed wetlands connected to the Salton Sea. The report says materials were discharged into the wetland and about 1,200 acres of wetlands were left with insufficient water to sustain their ecological functions and values. As part of the settlement, CTR must return the wetlands to their former condition. Those plans are currently being reviewed by the EPA, and Rod says CTR will create more acres of wetlands in the future.
To be honest, the situation with the EPA was cleaning out an existing ag drain. Ag drains hadn't been maintained. We went to clean them out and got a notice of violation. I think that, to be honest, the Sackett ruling with the EPA will probably, hopefully, get some common sense. These are agricultural drains. It's an agricultural district. This is you got mud pots and things exploding and CO2 coming up through the ground, and it's not a pretty place, right? So, I think sensible mitigation plans, either dust or building new wetlands, rather than worrying about cleaning out ag drains, that really should have been cleaned out under the QSA. But yes, we're planning, I think it's around about 160 acre wetland to the north of us on CTR property that will build or connect with the Worcester. It makes sense. It just sort of nicely connects with the Worcester ponds up there. So we've got that. That's part of the mitigation plans.
While facing both progress and setbacks, Rod says he's ready to bring his 13 years of work to life.
We're very active, and if people want to connect, they just connect directly with us. We're a small business. We've got our folks here on the ground. So it will have a cause and effect like you wouldn't believe. So I'm more happy that we're just seeing the cranes turn up and seeing things, action happening. Then once you get full belief, everything will follow. It'll just completely change. This whole landscape will be completely different in a couple of years' time.
Imperial County leaders are also optimistic Lithium Valley has the potential to change the area's direction. In March, county leaders released the almost 200-page Lithium Valley specific plan to the community for review and public comment.
Today we stand on a threshold of a new era for Imperial County, one filled with promise, prosperity, and progress.
So what is a specific plan? Here's how Imperial County describes it.
It establishes where and how projects like lithium extraction and renewable energy production can be developed, and it sets clear rules for things like land use, design, infrastructure, permitting procedures, and community improvements.
However, 5 days after the plan was released, BHE Renewables announced a suspension on its permitting process for 3 geothermal sites, putting a pause on a portion of its project. Imperial County's executive office released a statement saying this was, quote, undoubtedly disheartening, saying the BHE projects were expected to create 1,500 construction jobs and 183 permanent operational jobs. The projects also had a projected 30-year economic impact of $3.82 billion. So why did the company suspend its plans? BHE Renewables denied an interview request for this report. However, a press release from Imperial County cites prolonged permitting and transmission issues. But the county says, despite the setback, they're committed to making sure lithium and geothermal development move forward. I sat down with Imperial County Supervisor Ryan E. Kelly, who says the Lithium Valley specific plan is the first step in rewriting the area's history.
I do believe that we have an overwhelming support of trying to change the story of Imperial Valley, where we have the highest unemployment. We have these hazards, including the New River and the Salton Sea behind us. And we are a self-starting county. We've been doing a lot on our own back, and we want to see this be successful, and we will be successful.
And Supervisor Kelly says the benefits of this industry would extend beyond Imperial County as well.
This is a source of critical minerals for national security. So we are dependent on about 97% of all of the finished battery materials coming from China. We are going to need lithium for any battery storage and technologies of the near future. Securing that resource for our domestic need is a national security issue.
To help boost the local lithium industry, Supervisor Kelly and others have pushed to receive funding from the government. However, in October, Lithium Valley was denied federal funding for a second time.
White House Advisor Podesta out here just last January. We had Governor Newsom was on site. So yes, it is disappointing. Why didn't it happen? I can only speculate that it was for political motives, because Thacker Pass in Nevada was awarded $2.6 billion in loan guarantee. Thacker Pass, it's an open pit mine. They will also be using some environmentally hazardous materials to be able to extract lithium from that location. The choices they've already made do not jive with the policies that they've already written.
But individual developers are still securing financing on their own. The Department of Energy announced a $1.36 billion loan to Energy Source Minerals for construction and operation of its geothermal and lithium facility. To make sure some of the money created from this industry stays local, Imperial County has established a tax per ton of lithium extracted, which ranges from $400 to $800 depending on weight of the lithium. 20% of the funds from that tax will go to Salton Sea restoration efforts. The other 80% will head to Imperial County. That's where a little more than half of the money will be used for government-level services, including road enhancements, expanded judicial buildings, and new facilities. And the remaining 30% will be distributed to communities that are both directly and indirectly affected by lithium extraction. How can the different communities around the sea use the money that's allocated to them through that tax?
So if, say, Westmoreland wanted to make use of it in a certain way for their wastewater plant, or they wanted to use it for their streets, or there are no restrictions. They do have to report how they use it. And we have set up either if they have a city government or if they had an advisory council or a committee that representing, so Desert Shores Restoration. This project actually came from an RFP the county released in 2015. And the community designated this as a project that could be done, that could reestablish water into the channel, and it could be recreated in the other harbors and keys along the sea.
In previous drafts of the plan, public feedback has focused on water use, air quality, and seismic activity. And even in this latest report, water usage numbers are still uncertain. As the report says, there are significant challenges to accurately estimating water supply and demand for a project of this immense scale. However, the report says a water master plan will be prepared in collaboration with IID, and the groups will work together to develop new policy to meet water demands of non-agricultural use. Air quality and seismic activity monitors will also be established and under regular review in the project zones, complying with state standards. Encroachment on endangered species is also a concern. In a 2022 report by the Nature Conservancy, experts identified a handful of endangered or threatened species that could be impacted by lithium extraction, including the desert pupfish, Yuma clapper rail, tricolored blackbird, Swainson's hawk, and California black rail, many of which thrive in newly formed wetlands at the south end of the Salton Sea. These concerns are what led to the legal pushback against lithium developers. Supervisor Kelly says the health of the environment and communities is a priority for the county.
We are very focused on making sure that the environment is not going to be degraded by anything that we're proposing. But if you go out there today, the area that's adjacent to the Salton Sea is already exposed, and it is a hazard today. So every development that would be adjacent to the Salton Sea is going to have a mitigation plan associated with controlling the dust from where they are going to be active.
Between lawsuits, settlements, and developments, it's been a few tumultuous months for Imperial County. However, all eyes now turn to the completion of the programmatic draft environmental impact report.
Overall, this has been a long haul, and this is, from my time invested, over 12 years of trying to see this happen. I am positive, and we are going to make this happen to benefit everyone that lives in Imperial County, benefits California, and benefits the United States of America.
Around the sea, more development could soon be underway, including in Salton City, where over 6,000 residents call the area home.
However, there's a proposed solar project that would change its makeup, and a local petition has formed to stop the development.
The petition's creator says he learned about the proposal from off-roaders who saw signs up on a desert lot. But other members of the community haven't heard about it.
It's going in along the edge of the sea.
Right along the edge of the sea and the channels.
In the Riviera Keys neighborhood of Salton City, many were surprised to learn about the solar proposal.
Nobody has even mentioned that. And that kind of sets me back, because I would think that even in the neighborhood, I interact with a lot of them, and nobody's even mentioned this to me.
The Wildcat Energy Farm project was presented to Imperial County by RAI Energy, a Silicon Valley-based renewable energy development company. The solar farm has the potential to produce massive amounts of renewable energy with little to no carbon emissions. RAI's proposal occupies a portion of Salton City, a community on the sea's western shore that's about 19,000 acres in size, comparable to Palm Desert. The project would cover 5,900 acres, about 1/3 of the city's overall size, and crosses over State Route 86. A small portion of the project sits near the Keys, a row of channels that were once full of water, but have dried up as the sea shrinks, leaving the homeowners on dry embankments of toxic dust, and making them concerned about potential development.
The problem I have is the environmental situation. This area has already become, quote unquote, kind of a toxic thing, because they keep doing these redundant things.
Those concerns are reflected in the Wildcat Energy Farm's project report, which listed environmental factors that may be impacted by development: water quality, soil, greenhouse gas emissions, land use, air quality, and hazardous materials all made the list. Those issues, along with health and infrastructure worries, are what led other homeowners in the area, like John and his wife, to create a petition to stop the project.
I don't appreciate when my environment gets run over out here. If you look at them, the solar panels are row by row, side by side. What they have done is taken many of the small predator birds, like the burrowing owl, and they have a range right in there on the solar panels. That's where they fly to hunt. So now what they've done is they've taken away their habitat.
The proposed project would sit less than a mile away from the sea's shore at the south end of Salton City. And while this area is primarily made up of barren sand, it's currently zoned for future growth, as county code designates it for low-density residential and commercial. And a portion is set aside for preserving the space from development. But RAI is requesting to change the entire project zone to renewable energy. To approve this project, Imperial County leaders would have to approve a zone change.
It's in our planning commission at the moment. Encroachment on residential does not seem like a good fit, but it is on open ground and it is private, so we'll have to see where that leads. There There are other locations. I'm not sure why this location was chosen. In some cases, solar gets into our wheelhouse and then gets flipped to another company to actually develop it. So we'll have to learn more about what their intents are.
Aside from zone changes, neighbors had other concerns.
Might I ask, where is all that power going to?
Application materials for the project show the power is proposed to be sent through an IID transmission line to a substation that will then send power to San Diego and Arizona. As for notifying homeowners about their plans, local and state regulations require direct mail to be sent to property owners within 1/2 mile of the outer property boundary and through local newspapers. And as more homeowners learn about the proposal, many have said it's not the solar progress they're opposed to, it's the location.
I am not so ecologically hamstrung that I don't want progress. I just don't want the progress in my back pocket when there's all of this room around here to work in. I think it's very inconsiderate, and I don't know why they're doing it here. There's plenty of other places.
I hate to say this, really are they thinking about it for our best interests or their own?
The county is in the middle of an environmental report to further study its impacts. RAI Energy declined to comment on their proposal until after the environmental report is finished.
With so many projects and proposals underway at the Salton Sea, many local residents want to bring the focus back to the health and environmental issues. And that includes a local activist who's taking big steps to raise awareness.
Yeah!
44 hours later, the endurance runner known as Iron Dad crosses the finish line to the cheers of his community. He just finished a solo race around the Salton Sea's entire shoreline. The almost 90-mile run around the sea takes him through polluted mud that squishes and sinks. And he does it to call attention to an unfolding ecological crisis.
The Salton Sea is going to dry up to what they call a maintainable size, which is going to be far smaller than it is right now. And there are different outcomes, some better than others, and I can encourage the better outcomes. And this is a way of, number one, bringing awareness to the situation here, and number two, encouraging certain outcomes that are going to lead to more wildlife, preserving the natural beauty, and allowing the Salton Sea to change in a positive way.
Iron Dad started this awareness project in 2023. His run is live-tracked online, allowing people around the world to see his progress, distance, and learn more about the sea's shrinking shoreline. I spoke to the activist and runner at his home near the North Shore Yacht Club, where the scenic view from his living room serves as a constant reminder of his goal.
This is a beautiful place to live, and a lot of people don't, really appreciate it for what it is. It's probably the best example, the starkest example of outcomes when we do things, like divert rivers to coastal cities.
Every year Iron Dad has completed this run, the distance around the sea has gotten smaller. The different colored lines track his race from year to year as the Salton Sea shrinks and more muddy shoreline is exposed. The run is continuous, no stopping, no sleeping.
So what I see out there is emerging artifacts from the history of the Salton Sea. I see speedboats from the 60s. I see propellers around the military installations, which are buried airplane engines, at least, if not entire airplanes.
The gear needed to run around the Salton Sea is different from a typical race. Iron Dad straps on snowshoes to traverse the sludgy shore, and he wears a respirator.
Well, dust isn't great for you from the get-go, but also there are many toxins in the soil that come from the runoff. That's how the sea's fed. And there's heavy metals that are in the soil, they're just natural. So generally speaking, if you're going to be out on the sea for many hours, it's a good idea to wear a respirator.
While he's not running or training, Iron Dad is creating. He's an artist whose works can be seen on display at Bombay Beach, including the iconic lemonade stand and phone booth. And he encourages visitors to make the trip.
We have, very active artist communities out here. It's a one of the weirdest spots in California. So if you're a tourist who loves, to see the weird and unusual and unexpected, it is a great place to come.
His Salton Sea run and art have gained national attention over the years, and he says he's just getting started as he continues to push for solutions.
One of the important functions of the Salton Sea historically has been an important stop on the Pacific Flyway for migratory birds. So the wetlands bring back that function. And it's very much needed because we've destroyed the wetlands throughout, California. We have very few left.
As he plans to continue his race around the sea, raising awareness about its problems until no water remains.
We have $750 million plus to mitigate the effects of the sea, and that can be spent in all kinds of ways. So, people who are impacted by the Salton Sea, which is pretty much the entire Coachella Valley and Imperial Valley, and even the coastal cities as the dust playas, get increasingly exposed, they could start looking into what are the mitigations that they'd like to see.
Every year, Iron Dad's race gets shorter and shorter as the sea recedes and more toxic lakebed is exposed. And his findings were consistent with a recent study done by a local microbiologist who's making an impact and inspiring the next generation of community scientists.
This instrument, what it does is it uses light, and then it tests how much particles per milliliter is in the sample that you have, and it gives you a good reading.
A group of community scientists and students gather at the north shore of the Salton Sea. This lab field day is organized by the nonprofit Alianza Coachella Valley.
We're testing phosphate, sulfate, ammonia, and pH today.
The goal is to monitor changes in the water, providing local communities with information that may impact their health.
Because when we set out to do community science in the Salton Sea itself, we're like, well, what's the link between the water and the air quality? Hydrogen sulfide is very, very clear about that. There's a clear connection there. The community chose that research question. They were really concerned about what it could do for their health.
Microbiologist Dr. Ryan Sinclair has teamed up with Alianza to help in their research. He takes a small boat out onto the water to collect samples. The information is then logged online at saltonseascience.org, providing the most current levels of a range of gases and compounds. While what's in the water is troubling, Dr. Sinclair says the rate the water is disappearing is concerning as well. Sinclair's team set out to map the rate the shoreline is retreating, and his findings were published in the journal Geographies. Their research shows the sea is receding 3 times faster than before 2017.
The reason we did that was because of community interest. It was almost the same as this project with the water, in that people really wanted to know what's going on with this water. Why is it going down so much? Right at 2018, this lagoon here was still connected to the sea. And that's when I first started.
2018 was a pivotal year for the Salton Sea. That year, a water transfer agreement that sent 800,000 acre-feet of water to the sea annually ended. The agreement was part of a mitigation effort that was put in place after the Imperial Irrigation District signed an agreement to transfer water from Imperial Valley to a growing San Diego County. There, San Diego pays a premium price for the resource to IID. With less water going to Imperial Valley farmers, the sea receives less farm runoff, and the mitigation effort was put in place to prevent it from drying up. But there was a major difference after that effort stopped.
So we were able to show that from 2018 to 2021, you had a certain rate of change that happened and to produce all of this playa right here. We had a bunch of community members come out, and we had a big balloon, and you have a couple of tethers on it, and you walk it, and the balloon has a camera, and it takes a picture every second. And that allowed us to say, hey, look, it really started dropping. And that's kind of what we say in the paper. That's one of the conclusions. The other thing it allowed us to do was look at the rate that it changed, and then project out like, okay, well, in 10 years, how much farther is it going to be out?
The research projects future shoreline positions for 2031, highlighted in light blue, and 2041, highlighted in beige, showing a large decrease in water over the next 15 years, which means a loss of habitat for native and migrating wildlife.
And so then we're able to take the estimated amount of playa, say in 2040, and take that and then model to say, well, if there's this much more playa, meaning the uncovered shoreline, then we're going to actually have this much dust come out, and the dust is going to come out and it's going to impact the community. And so we're able to kind of project like how much the air quality is going to change.
And this problem is bigger than the Coachella or Imperial valleys. The Salton Sea Authority reports hydrogen sulfide gas, responsible for that rotten egg smell, has traveled over 150 miles during large plume events, reaching from Imperial Valley to Los Angeles County.
Chronic exposure to hydrogen sulfide gas is something that I'm working on now. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the risk assessment with that.
So are there any solutions?
Myself, I've always thought that the wetlands are the answer for some of these things, because if there's no more water that's going to come in, we have to manage the water that we have. And instead of just letting the drain water from the ag fields flow directly in or flow into emergent wetlands, we should manage those wetlands so that they reduce the contaminants that are in those drain waters.
In September 2024, the environmental organization, the Sierra Club, announced they were suing the Imperial Irrigation District to stop water cuts at the Colorado River from impacting communities here at the Salton Sea.
The Sierra Club tells me the lawsuit was dropped due to a legal technicality, but they haven't ruled out an appeal. Water isn't the only concern when it comes to air quality. The soil in the Salton Sea Basin is problematic as well. A study published in November of 2024 shows the Salton Sea Air Basin has some of the most polluted air in the country. And a team of researchers says it's not due to emissions from cars. They found the soil in the region emits more than 11 tons of nitrogen oxides per day, creating smog-forming pollutants. That's as much as a busy freeway.
Typically, we think of that like 80 to 90% of it coming from the vehicles. But in the Salton Sea Air Basin, both the Imperial and Coachella valleys, when we average them together, we found that at least a third of all of this pollutant gas that was just in the air when we sampled was coming from the soils.
Through 2 sampling sites, the soil pollutant estimates found by Dr. Faluna and his team are 10 times higher than what California air regulators currently estimate. And it's a growing problem. As smog plagues Southern California, regulations on combustion engines get tighter, but air quality isn't improving. So what causes the high rates of NOx in soil? Their research shows the main source is year-round farming activity.
And this has gotten me really working on this much more heavily, because we realized, well, we know the tailpipe emissions are still going down, but outside of the urban areas where those really, really dominate, it turns out those levels of that gas haven't changed much. They stopped improving about 10 or 12 years ago, because really, ultimately, it's about inefficiencies in our agricultural systems. Because, of course, you need the fertilizer. And the interesting thing about this air pollution issue is people automatically think, oh, synthetic pesticides are the main problem and so forth. And they may be health issues, but they're separate. This is just any mobile nitrogen you put on the soil. It could be cow manure. Anything natural is going to still have this nitrogen that the microbes are going to start consuming and leaking into the atmosphere.
And the issue is magnified as the Imperial Valley is an extremely important part of the state's agriculture landscape, with over 400 farms in the region. And the study shows temperature plays a factor as well, impacting local communities.
You can say, well, there's not that many people exposed to it. It's not like Los Angeles, where you have 10 million people breathing bad air, right? So our priority is there in the urban areas. But yeah, these rural communities, I think, are really suffering some of the worst impacts from this. It's probably Eastern Coachella more, but we believe this is true throughout the whole Coachella Valley. So even people who are, out golfing all day long, they're exposed to not great air. So it is, I think, a concern for a lot of people.
Dr. Faluna says the study shows the need to better account for emissions from agricultural soils to help improve air quality in both the Imperial and Coachella valleys.
So what are the proposed solutions? Well, one project management team has a long-term plan to save the Salton Sea that involves water importation.
It's a really kind of treacherous situation. This is what people live with their old boats. their docks not being accessible anymore.
Nathan White is at the bottom of a dry channel at the Riviera Keys in Salton City. The waterways used to connect to the sea, but as it recedes, they've slowly dried up, a problem Nathan wants to fix.
So these keys are very interesting. You can see they're about 20 feet below the shoreline that it used to be. So bringing projects in, bringing water back up will encourage new development to come into these areas.
Nathan and his team Aegis have developed plans to restore the channels, and that plan extends to their neighbors in the Desert Shores community, another small set of channels that have turned to dusty embankments, impacting homeowners and wildlife.
Here at Salton City Keys, we wanted to kind of build berms and put ocean water behind these keys, which right now are dry and desolate. And that started with Desert Shores. That's been moving through the process about how to build berms and get permits and install it. We handed it off early on because we couldn't get financing with some of our nonprofit partners to the state, and it's still kind of in the design process.
Aegis restores natural, rural, and urban environments. While efforts for channel restorations are underway, Nathan and his team have a larger goal in mind: saving the Salton Sea through water importation.
Originally, we were really focused on singular solution, right? Extracting algae and creating nutrient removal that way. But we realized that we can partner with so many different organizations that do that kind of work, and we can be project managers. So we've kind of evolved and incorporated many different companies into our technology kind of suite of parts, and really looked at how we can expand solutions like the Salton Sea around the world.
Their plan imports water from Mexico's Sea of Cortez and has multiple benefits. It's broken down into 3 phases. Phase 1 extends and deepens the existing Coyote Canal. Aegis expects enough water to flow through to flood the currently dry lakebed Laguna Salada.
At Laguna Salada, it's about 15 feet below sea level, so we can bring in ocean water using high tides within 7 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border. And everything from there is a little tiny hill, but pretty much downhill from there.
Phase 2 includes dredging a series of canals to allow more tidal waters to flow in. Then in Phase 3, a sea berm will be created. A pump station and pipeline will move water through the pass, and a canal will extend from the end of the pipeline to above the Salton Sea, restoring the waterway.
The benefit of that is that you start helping the Pacific Flyway right away. You start helping the evaporation water right away. So a 4-year timeline, not dealing with the United States and California, the regulatory process, is very quick.
Water importation plans have been reviewed over the years by a state panel, but they were rejected due to cost and other factors.
A lot of people say that it's like technology that hasn't been invented yet. And for our design, it's a pipeline. And it's a dirt berm. So like the technology has definitely been invented. We've done much bigger projects in our American pastime, the Panama Canal as an example. But here in the United States, we built all kinds of amazing engineering. And the real problem is that China and these other countries are surpassing us from an infrastructure standpoint. People just look at dealing with another country as being a hurdle. We look at that as an opportunity. I would just say the biggest hurdle is a lot of people don't understand the cost. Our proposal is looking at like a $1 billion project, but if you don't do anything at the Salton Sea, it might be $30 to $70 billion of cost. If you fix the Salton Sea, it might be $30 to $70 billion of revenue.
The proposal by Aegis would primarily be funded through private sector. The state's own 10-year plan to reduce dust and support wetlands has a price tag of over $400 million, and that's just for Phase 1. There are long-term restoration proposals that are being considered by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, but those results won't be available until 2029.
And we submitted for water importation, an RFI, to bring water in from Mexico. And we had 3 comments on our review, which is pretty outstanding for a binational 300-mile project, and then resubmitted to California Natural Resources Agency and UC Santa Cruz. And we actually had 1 comment. Since that point, the Army Corps of Engineers is involved, and they're looking at strategies, but they're not including water importation. So for us, that's our biggest advocacy that I just did today with the Salton Sea Authority, is to say, hey, look at the solution and how it can affect everything around the region.
In the meantime, Nathan and his team are continuing the conversation about water importation. The The 5th annual Binational Water Summit convened in March to discuss those plans.
This is why it's important that we reach out to our partners, especially the federal government and the state government in terms of what their responsibility.
And Nathan remains optimistic about the Salton Sea's future.
It's about a way to create revenue, resources, and abundance for everyone on the planet. And once we can get there, we can share our resources and really have a positive impact for all of humanity, where people don't have to suffer. And that's the opportunity out here in the desert, right? It's not just about its survival, it's about really enjoying life.
California is home to 11 conservancies. These organizations focus on protecting and enhancing natural resources. And the newly established Salton Sea Conservancy is the latest to join the list.
It was created through Senate Bill 583, which was co-authored by Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia and Senator Steve Padilla.
It's the first conservancy created in almost 25 years in the state. It wasn't an easy lift. The state of California has a huge interest, both financially and from a liability standpoint, in seeing the restoration there happen. It's important to the air quality, it's important to preserving resources, it's important to reserve that ecosystem that's developed over the many decades since Salton Sea came into existence. And so the Salton Sea Conservancy will be a permanent legacy governmental entity that will be responsible for focusing on the restoration and management.
The Salton Sea Conservancy is established within the Natural Resources Agency, and it aims to operate, maintain, and manage projects relating to the sea's restoration. $500,000 have been earmarked for those projects, and a 15-member board of directors will be appointed by January 1st and will include a range of diverse backgrounds.
And there will be public voices that will continue to be engaged in that because of the Conservancy that might not have been before. It's important that we make sure those investments and that progress is protected permanently in the long range. And it wasn't enough to have that just, part of somebody's, 100 things to do in a portfolio at CNRA. That we needed an entity that was going to create nothing but singular focus on this subject because it's so massive and so impactful.
And Senator Padilla says he created the Conservancy to show communities around the sea that their issues are still being heard and addressed at the state level.
The next steps would be appropriating that in the legislative process. And making sure that we're beginning to start that transition to stand up the Conservancy and get it going. And now the work begins to get it implemented and to move forward. So we're excited about that opportunity as well.
From shore to shore, there are so many efforts underway at the beautiful yet troubled Salton Sea, and more progress is set to unfold soon.
With all eyes on Lithium Valley and the future environmental impact report, we'll continue to track the very latest developments on NBC Palm Springs. Thank you for joining us.